go.
All right, cool. Welcome to the last and final workshop of the Career Readiness Series. Today, we're going to be talking about graduate studies and research and how we can prepare ourselves for them and also be able to look out for these varying opportunities. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so just a quick announcement before we start off with the workshop today. For the upcoming winter 2023, if you guys are interested in leading a workshop, we do have an opportunity for members to be able to lead their own workshop or series of workshops throughout the quarter. So if that is something of interest that you would like to do throughout the quarter, again, remember that the topics that you cover are completely up to you. So if there's a topic that you would really like to explore during the winter quarter, this is a great opportunity to be able to do that and also be able to share what you find with fellow ACM members. So if you just go ahead and scan the QR code, it will take you to a Google form, and there you'll fill out more information regarding the workshop, kind of what details are expected from you, and how you can kind of flesh out your workshop and go from there. With that being said, let's go ahead, let's jump into today's topic of graduate studies and research. So today we're going to be talking about a few key ideas. We'll get started with what exactly graduate studies are, what are the different programs for graduate studies, and how they are different or perhaps even similar in some ways. And then we'll kind of go into why one might want to do a graduate program in the first place, understanding the benefits and also the cons at the same time. And since we are at UCR, there is a special program that many of you guys may have heard of called the BS plus MS program. So we'll talk more about what exactly that program is and how that program may be of interest for those interested in a graduate program. And then we'll also talk about more generally about how you can prepare yourself to apply for these various programs. And then we'll move on to the more research side, where we'll talk about what research is, why one should even bother investing into research, and how it's so important and how we can finally get these opportunities. With that being said, let's go ahead, let's move on. So we'll start off today by talking about what exactly graduate studies are. They're most commonly offered through two types of programs, either a master's or a PhD program. These two programs are different in quite a few ways, however, they are similar, and we'll kind of go over the key differences between the two in the next two slides. However, the main goal of both of these programs is to expand on the education that has been provided in your undergraduate studies. So for example, I think most of us here are taking like computer science, maybe data science or computer engineering as an undergrad, right? So during the undergrad education cycle, you learn a lot of the basics. You understand, what computers are, how to be able to create very basic fundamental programs. And later on, especially with your tech electives, you're able to kind of dive deeper into special areas of computer science and learn about the varying parts of it, right? And how you can apply them to whatever projects or perhaps whatever work you're trying to do, right? Graduate studies kind of takes this a step further and kind of forces you to dive deeper into one of those specializations, either that be something like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, cloud computing, things like that. Things that you are perhaps too advanced for undergraduate students to grasp simply due to like the high learning curve and the various amounts of prerequisites. In addition, you also get exposure to be able to research real world problems, being able to understand, what are current problems with the technology that we have currently, and what are some possibilities or some possible solutions that we can implement so that we're able to maybe not eradicate these solutions, but definitely reduce the overall severity of these issues. In addition, on a more, like professional and career related note, it also does open up new possibilities regarding what your possible career paths may be. So in terms of industry, it opens up a lot of researcher positions within industry. And on the academia side, if you are interested in academia, it also allows you to very easily be able to either pursue another graduate program. So for example, if you do a master's, then that would open up a portal to being able to do a PhD. And once again, going back into research. So doing research or, becoming a professor and doing research at the same time. Any questions so far? All right. Okay, with that being said, we'll go ahead, we'll move on then. Okay, so let's dive deeper into what exactly the key differences and some similarities are between a master's and a PhD program. We'll start off with the master's program. So for the master's program, it is often a 2-year program, assuming that you are a full-time student. Obviously, there are special cases where it may take you less than 2 years or perhaps more than 2 years. That's completely okay. Especially if you're working part-time, that 2 years may become like 2 to 3 years, and that's completely okay as long as you're able to just complete it. However, just keep in mind that there are some limitations as to how long you can spend in a master's program. Many schools will require you to finish your master's program by like maximum 3 to 4 years. So that is something to keep an eye out for if you know that you won't be able to finish your program within the usual time, that being like 2 years. And since it is a part-time, there are like part-time opportunities. That also means you're able to work in industry simultaneously. And I say this for a reason, just because many times companies that you guys will be working at will also provide like financial aid towards your master's program, where they will give you, maybe a few grand or perhaps completely sponsor your graduate program. So that's another incentive as to why you might want to do graduate studies while being part-time as well. And usually these programs, the master's programs, are done right after undergraduate, just because otherwise it's not really worth the leap to pursue graduate studies afterwards. And also you have to get back into education. So that's another thing to consider. And I guess some cons to graduate programs and like masters is the tuition costs. The tuition cost is, at least at UCR, is very similar to how the undergraduate tuition costs are. Obviously, there will be some differences in, some minor differences. However, you can expect that you will be paying out of pocket for your graduate programs. Obviously, with financial aid, the numbers do differ a lot, but that is something to consider when doing a master's program. However, this isn't the case with the PhD program, and we'll talk about how that's different in a bit. And in terms of the overall application process, there are quite a few things that you have to consider with master's application. It is very similar to the undergraduate application program or like process, where you will have, a basic like UC application that you'll have to fill out. There will be some perhaps like essay questions that you'll have to fill out, kind of giving deeper insight into who exactly you are, why you want to do the program in the first place, things like that. And then on top of that, you will also be required to have like 3 letters of recommendation. So these letters of recommendation usually will come from your undergraduate professors who you may have either worked with in outside the classroom, either that be through research or like student clubs and organizations, or maybe you just had classes with them. Either you took their classes or you were TAs and graders for those classes. I think 2 of these do have to be from like technical professors. So that means that professors that are within your major. So for example, if you're a CS, if you're applying for a CS, a master's program, then 2 of those letters of recommendations would have to be from CS professors. So that's something to keep an eye out kind of early on, is kind of see, which professors do you want to be getting your recommendation letters from? And if so, how can you prepare and how can you stand out to that professor so that, your recommendation letter isn't like, yes, I worked with the student, they were in my class, they got an A, and that's about it, right? You want to stand out from the other students who also took that same class and also got A's, right? Maybe, reaching out to those professors, like for student organizations, collaborating through those environments, or also just perhaps if they have any research, interacting with them through that portal and whatnot. And then finally, we have the GRE, or the like graduate records examination. This is kind of very similar to the SAT for undergrads. However, the main difference just being that the GRE is used for master's program. One thing to keep in mind, though, is the GRE is slowly becoming optional, kind of like how the SAT is kind of having a shift towards it being optional. So that is something to keep in mind. However, it never hurts to just, kind of take it, test it out, see how it goes. However, I think all UCs have it optional, so that is not something that you'll have to worry about if you plan to attend a UC for master's. However, just make sure before applying to that school that you check out their requirements. If they do have GRE requirements, make sure that you are able to fulfill them and that you have enough time to be able to prepare, take the actual test, and maybe take it multiple times so that you're able to give them your best score. With that being said, any questions before we move on? All right. Okay, so then we kind of come on to what exactly the master's program entails in terms of like what you can expect out of this master's program. This is going to be more so tailored towards like UCR. Obviously, you can expect that other colleges will also follow a very similar format as to what you can expect from them. In terms of UCR, there's at the end of your master's program, you're essentially finishing a capstone experience, and that capstone experience can be one of the three listed here. So either that be like a comprehensive exam, kind of like a reverse SAT/GRE. So instead of taking a test to get into the college, rather you're taking a test to get out of the college. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at the various classes that you took. And when I say various classes, usually it's going to be looking at your graduate classes, right? And if we remember, I think from the course planning workshop, we talked about how graduate level courses are 200s and above, while undergraduate classes are 100s, right? And like less than 100s, right? So it's going to pick questions from those and kind of just quiz you like, do you understand the fundamentals of whatever classes you took? Would you be able to apply them in various scenarios and whatnot? And then if an exam isn't exactly your best suite, then there's also the option of a project or a thesis. The project is a complete like research project in which at the end of that project, you'll be kind of giving a presentation and a report as to perhaps, a small research problem, kind of digging into the various problems as to like why it exists and why it needs to be solved in the first place. And also, coming up with like a contribution or some sort of solution as to how you can perhaps reduce the severity of this research problem and things like that. And then lastly, we have the thesis. This is kind of more so like a PhD level, I guess, like intensity. However, it isn't as complete as a PhD simply because you don't have the same amount of time, right? So you do submit a thesis to kind of identify a problem and make, some meaningful research contribution. However, it doesn't mean that you'll be required to actually finish this. So it is something that if you are interested kind of going very deep into a particular subject, this might be the way to go, right? However, kind of depending on what you're looking for out of a master's program, you're free to choose any one of those three. All right. Okay, so that's pretty much the master's program. So with that being said, we'll go into the PhD program now. Okay, so the PhD program is often a 5 to 6 year program. So definitely like 2 to 3 times as long as a master's program. That is definitely something to keep an eye out for. I think many times people may not remember that it's a 5 to 6 year program. So that is something to consider is if you are planning to take a PhD, keep in mind that you're going to be kind of working on the same research issue for multiple years on end. And if that's something that does interest you, go for it. Otherwise, I would probably stay away from it. And a PhD is often completed after one has completed their master's. However, it isn't required, but a master's program is definitely a great way to kind of get your feet wet and understand what a PhD program might look like. So that's why a lot of students, they'll do their undergrad and then their master's and then their PhD. And then in terms of kind of what you can do with your PhD, you'll be able to pursue like industrial research. So research that's being applied within industry, once again, looking into different fields of CS, kind of optimizing and making the technology that we currently have even better, right? And if industry isn't your go-to, then you also have academia, which you'll be able to do even more research at like a college level and perhaps go into teaching as well. And in terms of the actual like difference between like the master's program and the PhD program is PhD program's a little bit more self-paced. So with the master's, you have like classes you need to take, deadlines to meet. However, with PhD, you do have, a few deadlines. However, the smaller deadlines are kind of up to you. It's going to be up to you how you want to divide up your work, kind of figure out when you want to get certain things done. And since you are going to be working on a much larger research project, it is something that the faculty will leave up to you how you want to time manage everything. Because keep in mind, by the time people are doing their PhDs, usually they'll have families, they'll have other commitments, other responsibilities. So that is something to consider, and that's why there's a lot of freedom in terms of how everything is spaced out for a PhD program. And in terms of tuition, rather than paying for a PhD program, colleges will pay you for a PhD program. Um, However, that doesn't mean they will pay you a lot. However, they will pay you like an amount for research, right? Yeah. And then the main thing for kind of both like PhD and masters is you guys want to be looking for professors to work under, right? Finding a professor that interests you. Maybe the work that professor has done is really interesting. You like their research papers. You really want to dive deeper into what exactly they do in their research and kind of become a part of that team. And this is usually done before applying to the school. More so because at once you reach a graduate level, you're not more so going to schools just for perhaps like prestige or just to get a degree. Right now, you are spending time, either that be like 2, 3, or even like 5 to 6 years to be able to research a problem. Right. So the school that you go to shouldn't really matter. It should more so be based on the professor and perhaps like the team and faculty there. Right. Are they people that you want to be working for the next 5 to 6 years? Do they provide the proper facilities that you need? For example, if you require perhaps tons of servers to be able to run your research, does that school provide the necessary servers? Or perhaps like the technology, campus resources, things like that, right? And obviously, you also want to make sure that the professor you're going to be working under is an expert within the field that you're interested in, right? For example, you wouldn't want to work under a professor who may be a GPU expert, whereas you're interested in machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? Yeah. Any questions so far? All right, cool. Okay, so then we come on to the BS and MS program. So I think many of us have heard about the BS-MS program, and many of us may be apply or maybe already enrolled within the BS-MS program when we got into UCR. So we'll kind of dive deeper into what exactly it is and why it's like a special program. So the BS plus MS program may also be called like the 4+1. And really what the entirety of the program is, in 4 years, you're able to complete your undergraduate. And in 1 year, you're able to complete your master's, right? And this program applies to most BCOE majors. However, if you are a data science major, unfortunately, you will not be able to take advantage of the 4+1. However, for majors like computer science, computer engineering, those majors will have the 4+1. So that is definitely something to check out if you are interested in graduate studies, but you're not sure of the time commitment. However, yeah, so I guess in terms of like kind of benefits, since it is 5 years total as compared to like the 6 years, obviously you do get out of, I guess, like your total education much like a year faster. And you will have kind of like a reduced workload since many of those classes are being overlapped, hence why the master's is only 1 year as compared to 2, simply because there are some undergraduate requirements that you would have to fulfill as a master's student. But since you did your undergraduate at UCR as well, you would essentially be able to kind of double count them when doing your master's. One thing to keep in mind, though, is the CS and CE requirements for the master's require CS 120A, 120B, CS 100, and 161. Obviously, this means that any classes that or the prereqs for those classes you would also need to complete. So for example, CS 120A requires CS 61, right? So that's a class that you would have to finish in order to be able to take CS 120A. And then another thing to keep in mind is notice how CS 120B is highlighted or like bolded, and that's because CS 120B is becoming a tech elective now. However, if you are interested in the master's program, you still will have to take that class. So that is something to watch out for. Is if you are interested in the MS program, then definitely make sure to take 120B, since it is going to be, I guess, kind of like a required tech elective in order for you to be able to do the master's program. Apart from that, all the other classes listed, those are core CS classes. So you would need those classes for both your undergraduate and your graduate degree. And then in terms of the application process, since it is both, like the same school and the same department, there is really no application process. More so, you just need to be able to meet the program requirements. The program requirements, again, are going to be that you meet the class requirements. So for example, like CS 120A, 120B, 100, and 161. And there is no GRE required. However, there are some GPA requirements. So you just need to make sure that you have a 3.4 GPA or higher cumulative, 3.2 for STEM, and 3.2 for your core classes. Yeah, any questions there? All right. Okay. And let's say for whatever reason, you're not able to commit directly to the masters and you kind of want to get a feel as to what exactly masters classes are going to look like. Instead, what you can do is if you do have extra space on your schedule, you can actually try out masters classes as an undergraduate. So remember, we talked about earlier how 200s classes are graduate level classes. A lot of them, all you really need to do is to be able to take the classes, perhaps just request instructor approval, or in other cases, all you need to do is just meet the prerequisites for those classes. And as long as you meet those prerequisites, you'll be able to get a taste as to what exactly a master's program might look like. And you'll notice that this doesn't only apply for master's, but also for the PhD program as well, where a lot of the classes that you will be taking, a lot of the research you'll be doing, it'll be focused more so on learning rather than grades. So you won't really be focused on, oh, I need to make sure I keep my GPA up. I need to make sure I get an A on the next midterm, things like that. More so, it's going to be, are you able to understand the material? Are you able to apply the fundamentals that you guys are learning, right? Things like that, right? Yeah, but more so, as an undergraduate student, you'll be able to kind of experience the material that's going to be taught. Obviously, the material will be much more in depth, right? And the rigor may be even more challenging than what you have experienced in your undergraduate classes. All right. Okay, so then we come on to research. So what exactly research is and how we can kind of prepare for research. So let's talk about what exactly research is and how this may differ from kind of what we think of like of SWE, right? And if we don't know what SWE stands for, SWE is just like software engineering or kind of like just industry as well, right? So research kind of focuses on expanding our current knowledge of computer science, right? Whereas SWE or like industry will focus more so on the applications of the current knowledge, right? And so research will focus on like specializations and intersections of computer science. So for example, they may focus on various research topics, including like bioinformatics, which would be like a specialization slash intersection of computer science and like biology, chemistry, things like that. And then you also have just specializations of CS, right? So for example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, high performance computing, either that be, on an embedded system or perhaps like on a cloud system, right? And a lot of times with research, you're going to be working with the unknown, right? You can't really Google your way out of research, right? You can't be like, hey, I have this problem that no one has solved. Therefore, if I Google it, I will be able to find my answer, right? It's not exactly how research will work. Instead, it's going to be kind of up to you to find creative solutions to these problems and be able to present your ideas and contribute to whatever research problem you are trying to attempt to solve, right? And Another key difference between research and industry is you'll often be working in much smaller groups, maybe only working with like 1 to 2 other researchers, perhaps on your project. Whereas in industry, you may be working with multiple people, either that be like 10 to 20 other developers who are also working on the same product, right? And which is fine. Many people like to work in smaller groups. It does give you kind of a chance to work more tightly with the code, right? There'll be less kind of black boxes for you to be working with. However, this does mean that it is also going to be more programming heavy. There's less of a focus on the other parts of like computer science and like SWE. So let's focus on like code review, having other developers check your code. Less focus on like deployments, making sure that the code we do write, it is able to kind of reach production, and also ensuring that the code is maintained well. And if there are any changes that need to be fixed, or perhaps the production code isn't working, then ensuring that we roll that back. There's not a ton of focus on that. More so, it's going to be focusing on the actual code that is being written, right? And it's not more so like programming heavy in terms of you might be doing more programming, right? You might be doing the same amount of programming, but more so you won't be focusing as much on kind of ensuring that your code is being deployed and whatnot, right? In addition, the work you may be working on may be like computationally advanced and expensive. So that kind of does give you the opportunity to work with special technologies and tools that you may not have been able to work with kind of within your classes or even within industry, right? A lot of these requirements will come from the fact that you'll have to crunch large sets of data or large numbers that may take hours to run, or even days to like perhaps just even compile or be able to execute properly, right? So being familiar with how that technology works, how to be able to take advantage of these advanced machines and be able to kind of get the results that you want out of them is also a great learning experience as well. Any questions so far before we move on? All right. Okay. So then we kind of come on to the last topic, acquiring research. So kind of how can you guys get prepared for research, and also like how do I reach out to people who are already involved in research, right? So a lot of these research groups and teams are going to be led either by professors or PhD and like MS students, right? So they are definitely kind of, I guess, like the person in charge of these positions. So they are definitely a great first contact to go to be able to learn more about these positions and how you can get them. And yeah, one thing to keep in mind, though, is if you guys are interested in industry research, those opportunities are usually only open to master's and PhD students. Since you guys are going to be applying your research skills within industry, right? So they kind of expect you to have a background in research, right? However, if you are trying to gain research opportunities on campus, the best way would be to kind of cold call and just email professors and other like masters and PhD students who are doing research. The key thing here is to be informed. So make sure that essentially you research the research. Make sure that the professor or researcher that you're talking to, make sure you know exactly what the research is and why you think you would be, or why you would be interested to work on that team. Perhaps, what are some personal skills that you want to get out of that research position, things like that, right? And then this also gives the professor or like researcher an idea of like, hey, this person seems really interested in my research. I think it'd be great if they worked on this research as well, right? And also through other conversations, you'll be able to gauge how much time commitment and perhaps any prerequisites there might be to that research position, right? Many times professors may have prerequisites, so you understand kind of the research that's going on, and you understand perhaps maybe the math, or if it's an intersection, you understand the various concepts that are being applied. Therefore, you don't like fall behind or have a hard time understanding the material. In addition, it's also great to understand the time commitment. Some research positions might be super lightweight in terms of how much time you spend per week. However, others might be much more involved. So that is definitely something to consider with your current schedule. Is do you think you'll be able to provide that time commitment? And obviously there may be certain situations where you may have to provide even more time, or perhaps usually provide more time than what you originally allocated for, right? Any questions there? All right. Okay. With that being said, that's pretty much it. Today was quite a short workshop, but thank you for attending. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stay back to answer them. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for today's workshop on graduate studies and research. Just a quick reminder, if you guys are interested in more of these workshops, check out ACM at UCR. We are the largest computer science organization on campus. Throughout the quarters, we host various workshops, events, socials, and projects. Feel free to learn more at acm.cs.ucr.edu. And if you haven't already, make sure that you guys join our Discord server so you guys can get up-to-date announcements. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for attending today's workshop.